Welcome to Cash Plays. And now your host, Bart Hanson.
Hello everyone, welcome to another week of Cash Plays. It's June 25th, the World Series of Poker, and a conversation with Raptor. As always, you can email me at cashplays@pokerroad.com. prradio@pokerroad.com was a few months ago. Cashplays@pokerroad.com. And, of course, you can send in voicemails, 877-836-ROAD, 877-836-ROAD. And boy, you know, it's getting worse and worse for me here at the World Series of Poker. I am now 0 for 10 in tournaments, yet I am not stuck for the trip. I've been doing very, very well on the side. So I just really think that I'm putting myself in a position a lot of the time, you know, to get there. I'm very, very disappointed in the 10,000 Omaha 8 or better. I got knocked out something like in 60th or something out of, 235. I went into day 2 with above average chips and then went ahead and lost many, many big pots in the first level and got short chipped right away. And it's amazing, just how, in a big limit tournament, how streaky it can be. Because I saw that Toto Leonidas, who actually plays a lot of 8-16-08 on full tilt, he was to the right of me in day 1, and I really wasn't impressed by the way that he played. He definitely knew how to play the game, but he was just a little bit passive, and I had him basically dead in 2 hands where he should have been knocked out of the tournament, where he was drawn to maybe 4 outs to chop with me, and he got there and he chopped, and he was at the final table, and I think he ended up finishing in the top 5. But anyways, again, very, very disappointing for me. I bubbled the 1,500 no limit from a couple days ago. So, on the tournament circuit, hopefully it's the big V for variance. Things have just not been going well for me. But again, on the side, I've been doing great. I played a very, very interesting hand last night, and I'm kind of perplexed at the way that the hand went down. And I'm going to bring it up with Raptor. I actually told him about it before he's going to come on for the conversation because think about it a little bit. And I kind of went through my head in this hand where we were playing a 6-handed quarter no-limit game. And this actually went down last night. And the makeup of the table was there were 3 tight players that would open lamp. Remember, we're playing basically 6-max. Open lamp, super, super tight. There was one big fish in the game, a guy that was awful. And then the guy to my right looked like a pretty decent, aggressive tournament player who had been opening a lot in late position after several limpers. And I had aces one hand, and I lost a big, big pot, and I played it very, very strangely, where I was out of position with the hand and had no idea where I was in the hand and had to check call 3 streets and lost about a $5,000 pot. And this is how the hand went down. Mississippi straddle here at the Rio, which basically means you can straddle, double the big blind on the button, and you have the option. So you basically should be doing it almost every hand. You've got a huge, huge advantage. So this guy to my right, he Mississippi straddles to 50 on the button. $7,000 effective stacks. He's got me covered. I got $7,000 in front. I've already doubled through. I have 2 aces in the small blind, and I'm first to act. I limp in. It gets folded around, and he raises it up to 225. And I was thinking about limp re-raising right there, but I thought that our stacks were pretty deep, and I didn't really want to play my hand face up. The guy was a very, very aggressive player. And if I limp re-raised to 800 and he called and I came out and I bet the flop, and he raised me, I just thought I could be put in a tough spot. I just didn't want to play my hand face up to this guy. At the beginning of the hand, I thought to myself, I can almost play this like a flopped set and just check, call the flop. Maybe it goes check on the turn and value bet the river. And that was my thinking, unless the board got something crazy for the way that this hand was going to go down. So I smooth called his bet. So the pot was about 500. The board came out 10-3 deuce dry, everything offsuit. I checked to him. He bets 400. I was thinking about check raising right there, but again, he has absolutely no idea what I have. And I really thought that if I check raised, he might fold some hands that I can extract value from later on. I want to give him the opportunity to hang himself like we've talked about in the past, where he's going to barrel. It's a really dry board. He might think that I'm check calling with pocket 8s or pocket 9s, and, he can definitely double barrel his board. So I check call. Now the pot's 1,300. The turn is an offsuit 6, so now the board is 10, deuce, 3, 6. I check to him, and he makes a hefty bet. He bets, I think it was 1,200, a full pot-size bet, and I'm thinking to myself, wow, I mean, what kind of hand is this guy representing here? I really thought that he totally had air at this point. Not that I would ever have 4-5 and turn it, but, a standard line there, maybe an open-ended straight draw gets there. I know a lot of times with like ace-10 or jacks or queens there, I'm checking behind that turn if I'm in his spot to extract value on the river. Unless we knew each other so well that he knew I knew that, and I was going to call him all the way down with 7s or 8s. So I check call again. 1,200, 1,224. Now the pot is about 3,700, right? 2,400 here on the turn, and the pot was 1,300 on the flop. The river comes an offsuit queen. So now on the board, the flop was 10, deuce, 3, turns a 6, river is a queen. And after I call the turn, I was like, I have to play this as a check, and especially if an overcard comes on the river, and maybe try to let him 3-barrel here with air. And I checked to him again on the river, and he bet 2,900 on the river. And again, I don't have any information about the hand. I played my hand very, very strangely, but I just thought that he could be value betting a hand that he ran into at the end with ace, queen, king, queen. The big bet at the end really, really perked me up because I was expecting him to bet something like 1,500 or 2,000. Kind of make it look like a value bet, kind of make it look like a bluff, a value bluff. So when he bet 2,900, I just really thought that the guy's got to have basically what is a monster here or just air, and he's just trying to get me off, with 3-barrel. And the way that I played this hand, I call. I mean, if I'm going to play the hand that way, I think I have to call. I don't think there's any way I can get away from it. And he flopped a set of 3s. And I basically ended up losing the maximum by playing my aces slow. Now, if I had just open raised in the small blind, I would have lost a pot, but probably not as much as 5,000. If I had limp re-raised him, I'm definitely going to lose a good-sized pot if he flops a set. Again, he wasn't a maniac. I think I can get away from it at some point, playing... it's weird. We've got 7,000 stacks, so we're playing almost 300 big blinds deep, but with a $50 straddle, and when the standard opening's to 200 or 250, the stacks play a little bit smaller because, it's almost like in the sense of that you're playing almost a $50 blind. So you're almost playing like 150 big blitz. But I don't think I'm going to stack off there in that spot with aces. And I just thought it was a perfect opportunity to try to check call against a really, really aggressive player. It just happened the guy woke up with 3s. I'd love your feedback. Again, cashplays@pokerroad.com. I'm sure a lot of you guys are going to be listening to this over at Card Runners. Very, very strange line that I took. Again, didn't give myself any information about the hand. Just thought that I could give an aggressive player a chance to bluff, and he ended up waking up with a hand. I'm going to run this hand by Stinger. Or by Raptor, by Brian, and see what he has to think about it. Another concept that I want to bring up. I was sitting to the right of Robert Williamson III in the 10,008 tournament. And I'm not really sure if this applies for Limit Hold'em, but especially when you're playing Omaha 8. When you're playing basically what is a marginal high hand, there are spots where you get in there with high hands, and there are spots where you raise with, high-low hands. Ace-king. In this specific hand, I popped up from the cutoff with ace-king, 9-deuce double suited. I think in the 4th or 5th level, and the limits are starting pretty high, so the limits are pretty high, and the big blind called me. And the board came out king-jack 3 with a couple clubs. So I've got top pair, king 9, I've got the backdoor not low draw, I bet, the guy calls. Now the turn is a 9, so the board is king jack 3 9, and I'm up against a fairly aggressive big blind. So the issue now is, yes, the board is draw heavy. There's a couple clubs out there. Yes, you could get bet called for value with a club draw. But is there a concept that I haven't really heard talked about pot controlling limit poker on the turn? And especially in this case in 08. In Hold'em, I'm kind of up in the air with it. I don't really know. I think sometimes you can do this. But in this specific case, I've got kings and 9s here. Ace, king, 9, deuce. And my hand really, I don't want to spew off, especially in a limit tournament when the limits are high. When I bet and the guy check raises me and it's an aggressive player, boy, it's really tough to call a check raise there. Queen 10 gets there, obviously. I don't beat a whole lot if the guy has a real hand. Do I want to induce a check raise? Or can I check the turn and call any river bet? Because a lot of times in 08, when you bet the flop and the board has come out high after being the pre-flop raiser, and then you check the turn on a third card that's above 8, a guy will automatically think that you've got a low hand and then just bet the river. The same thing could be said here if I had 2 aces. If I had raised it up with, ace, king, deuce, turns a 9, I check the turn, and now I'm going to call any river bet that might not be some sort of strange card like a queen of clubs or a 10 of clubs or something like that. But the concept of limit pot control on the turn, I think, is something that, again, really hasn't been addressed. And you see it at the higher limits, like when I'm playing 100, 200, Omaha 8, where my hand, and especially if the board wasn't that drawy and I've got like a top and bottom type hand, my hand really isn't good enough to call a check raise unless I'm really specifically trying to induce a bluff. But I can check the turn and call a river bluff. And again, Robert and I were talking about this, and he said, he had never really thought about it that way. And, we just had this whole dialogue. And this guy's a really, really nice guy, Robert Williamson III. He's been on, he's done a lot of poker TV and got that radio voice, but a super, super nice guy. I think he goes by Mr. Pielo. And I might actually have him on the show by the end of the World Series of Poker. But again, if you're playing specifically 08 here in a big limit poker type thing, pot controlling, checking behind in the turn, I don't think necessarily is a bad thing in this type of situation. So it's something that I think that I'm going to add more into my games, especially in Omaha 8. Again, I don't really know how it translates to Hold'em, because in Hold'em you never necessarily are always worried about the nuts. If you've got 2 pair, you're usually betting for value on the turn, even if the flush card hits. You're not really checking behind, just because you get so much value from someone calling with a naked spade, on the river. But again, in Omaha, and the Omaha high limit doesn't really exist. So this is kind of this case of, in this game, in Omaha 8, when you're playing, kind of a marginal high hand here, that checking the turn for pot control, even in limit, I think sometimes can be right. Again, emails, cashplays@pokerroad.com. Even if I don't read them on the show, I'm actually not going to read any on the show. I've been pretty vigilant about getting and responding to each one. So if you email cashplays@pokerroad.com, I will respond back. And I'd love to hear from some of you guys that might be, listening to the show for the first time over probably on a link on Card Runners. So with that, we are going to take a little break, and we will be back with Brian Raptor Benefield right here on Cash Plays.
Cash Plays.
Scott Huff here from Two Jacks in the Hole.
And Joe Stapleton, also present and accounted for.
Joe, I have some bad news. I am leaving the USA.
That's actually very good news, Scott, because outside the U.S. is the only place you can play on Titan Poker.
Actually, I heard about that, Joe. PokerRoad.com and Titan Poker have teamed up to bring you an exclusive $10,000 package to the World Series of Poker.
Yeah, it's actually a pretty ridiculous package. You get 5 nights in Vegas, flights to and from whatever country you win it from, appear as a special guest on a Poker Road program. Get picked up at the airport in a limo. That's my favorite part. But Scott, I know your favorite part is you get a coaching lesson from Joe Seabach, dinner with him and the Poker Road crew, and let's not forget the fact that you get a $1,500 buy-in to a bracelet event, No Limit Hold'em number 53.
It's easy to sign up. All you have to do is download and install Titan Poker. Use bonus code POKERROAD, one word. Deposit at least $50 to your Titan Poker account, and then earn the most points between now and June 20th, and you get that $10,000 package to the World Series of Poker.
And remember, guys, this contest is only eligible for non-U.S. residents, so make sure you sign up with bonus code POKERROAD. You can't afford not to.
Cash Plays.
And welcome back to Cash Plays, World Series of Poker, and a conversation with Raptor, David Benefield. Thanks for coming on, Dave.
Anytime.
We like to kind of go over how guests come up because maybe not everybody knows you out
Sure.
there, even though you're a pretty prominent figure in the internet world. So tell us a little bit about kind of your story and how you moved up to basically become where you are?
I guess I started just like any other kid playing, with friends or whatever in high school, just kind of, 25 cent, 50 cent, no limit. Everybody's buying in for $20 and you're just kind of going from there. And I tried to, find bigger stakes games around town. I grew up in Fort Worth, and I found some kind of like clubs and stuff to play in. They ran stuff like 3-6 limit, 1-2 no limit, pot limit. And I was kind of playing in those games for about a year or so until I turned 18 and started playing online. When I first started playing online, I started playing sit and goes. I started out, $10 sit and goes and ran really good, I guess, and just kind of moved on up from there. And I didn't really even start playing cash games until probably about 2.5 years ago. I stuck with sit and goes for a really long time, just always grinded them out, and that was just kind of my thing, I guess. And, over time I saw some of my buddies just having really sick results in cash games, and I decided to make the switch, and, it's gone pretty good.
Well, and maybe one other thing that people don't know about you is you were or still are roommates with Durr, is that right?
Yeah, we have a house in Texas, but neither of us are really there that much.
Yeah.
So we're probably there maybe 10% of the time at the same time. So,
well, talk a little bit about just bouncing stuff off of him and him bouncing stuff off of you. How has that become? How has that excelled both of your games?
I think it's definitely helped both of our games a lot. He's got a very unique style, and it's just something totally different than anyone else I've ever had a conversation with. And he's got a great poker mind. He thinks about the game super well. And, it's definitely helped my game, having conversations with him about hands, just kind of, young guys or whatever, when they're living together, they talk about poker a lot when they're playing all the time. And so we talk about hands all the time. And, just having another perspective that's completely different than yours just helps immensely. And it's just really hard to put into words how much it's helped.
And that's a lot of people email the show and they say, how can I get better? And one of the main things that says, if you can find guys that are good at the game or just good poker buddies that you can bounce things off of. When you bounce stuff off of him and some of your other roommates, you guys aren't afraid to criticize each other like that's a bad play,
absolutely
right?
not.
That's how you learn, right?
Anytime you do something even remotely bad, like the other one's going to ridicule you for it and call you an idiot and say you played it terrible. But that's part of the learning process, and you get better because of it.
You've got a few videos up on Card Runners, 3 or 4. The most recent being the heads-up match with Patrick Antonius from the $25,000 sit and go on Full Tilt. And I want to let's start with that, bring up a couple of questions. A couple of times you chose not to 3-bet or sometimes 4-bet, or sometimes you would limp in on the button. In talking about how a heads-up sit and go is a little bit of a different format than, say, like a deep stacked heads-up cash game. Let's talk a little bit about that.
Okay. I feel like I play heads-up sit and goes pretty well coming from a sit and go background. I used to play a lot of the heads-up sit and goes and the star structure or whatever. Granted, the stacks are a lot more shallow there, but I think there's a lot of really small changes you can make. One thing is just I don't think you should be as aggressive pre-flop. That really brings down, you just kind of turn it into a flip fest, I guess, or whatever, like you were talking about earlier. And just with 3-betting, more marginal hands that you would in a cash game, I just feel like it's more effective to be limping, taking seeing flops in position, keeping the pot smaller, and just kind of trying to grind it out and let the other person make a mistake before you do. I think that's just super important. You only get a certain amount of chips. You can't reload, and that just little things like that.
And there were some people that criticized you, I think, on the Card Runners forums when they posted that video, that they said that they thought that you were playing scared or that you were playing too conservative. Were you pretty happy overall with your performance in that match?
I lost one big hand that kind of turned the tide for me.
Mm-hmm.
That ace jack hand. I don't know if you got to see that. I think I made a good fold in that spot, and then towards the end I got it in with jacks versus ace 9 for 75-80% of the chips in play. And, I got sucked out on, and there's just not a lot you can do about that. And I feel like I played really well. I got my money in good, and just didn't work out.
Well, the funny thing about that draw, obviously, you take Antonius. Now, recently, just even in the last week, Antonius wrote, in his blog, basically making an open challenge to the top heads-up players. And I think in his blog, he didn't even list the guy who's playing him now, Krantz, who came on the show a couple weeks ago.
Right.
And over 3 or 4 sessions, Krantz has been doing very well against him. Now, you have some experience playing him heads-up?
Krantz or Patrick?
No, Patrick.
I've played him a little bit. I've probably played him 1,500 hands or so online, and So, I mean, I wouldn't say I have a ton of experience, but we've definitely played a little bit.
What do you think about that matchup, just kind of as a little gossip type thing?
I mean, I think it's great. Krantz is... he's kind of crazy. He's just one of those super aggressive guys. He's super smart, and he's a really good player. And, it's definitely fun to watch.
Mm-hmm.
Patrick's, one of the best for sure. And, he's just a super tough opponent, and they're both really great players, and it'll be pretty interesting to see what happens between them.
One of the things that Krantz said, and let's switch this over to heads-up cash games. One of the things he said that some of the great heads-up players do is they balance their range check raising with somewhat marginal hands in cash games. And one of the things I want to bring up is, say you flop a top pair with a weak kicker, like a king 5 on a king 9-3 board. At what point are you building a pot up there heads up? At what point where you put too much money where you're only going to get called by a hand that's better than you, and what the whole balance issue there with a hand like that?
It really depends on the opponent you're playing. A lot of times if you have king 5, you call raise king 5 suitor or whatever out of the big blind. Flop comes king 9-3, and you check. Say you're playing Patrick, he bets. He's going to be floating that flop with everything if you check raise him. Queen 10, queen jack. Almost every 9 that he has, because he's going to be because your range is going to be a lot wider, because you're going to be check raising hands like queen 10, queen jack as well,
right?
And then you're going to be out of position for the rest of the hand. It's going to make it more difficult to play. And I think what you're talking about is more like kind of merging your ranges and stuff. So you need to include hands like king with a weak kicker or whatever, so that they don't always know where they're at. Because if you're only check raising super strong hands or drawy hands, you're going to be polarizing your range and just making it a lot easier to play against you.
One of the other I saw an interesting hand in the sit and go against Patrick that you played, where you flopped top and bottom with ace 4, and you had limped in on the button, and the board came out, I believe, ace 9-4, and you had the ace of clubs, so top and bottom, and he checked you, you bet, he check raised you, and you said, this is a spot here where I'm going to 3-bet because it looks like I have air so much that I might induce a 4-bet with air, right?
Right,
and I
right.
position the rest of the hand, right?
Yeah, a lot of times, something I do that's a lot different than, I guess, a lot of the other high-stakes winning players is I like to limp a lot of buttons. It's just something I've always kind of done. It seems to work really well, fits well into my game. And when you I limp with just about all my aces other than, ace 10 or better.
Mm-hmm.
I raise those, obviously. But people never give you respect for having an ace on that kind of board, like an ace 9-4 board or whatever. And if he check raises, he should be able to check raise that pretty wide, because he's not going to put an ace in my range. And so he can be representing, just about anything, and it doesn't matter. If I don't have an ace, it's hard for me to continue. But he could also expect me to, 3-bet pretty light, because he knows that I know that he's going to be check raising light, whatever, and just all these levels that it goes into. And having that ace 4 there, I'm super happy to get it all in versus him, just on the flop or whatever. And so I 3-bet, hoping that he would 4-bet or call, or just kind of continue in the hand.
Now, the interesting thing also about that hand is the turn came a third club. There was a flush draw. There was ace 9-4. The turn was another blank, but it was a club, and you had the ace of clubs. And he checked you on the turn, so you've got the nut flush draw on top and bottom. And, as a kind of a combination type thing, you check behind, maybe giving yourself a free draw. If you bet that turn and he just has a weak ace, maybe he goes away.
Yeah,
right?
the thing is, I just don't think I get a whole lot of value in betting the turn. The hands that I beat are almost always going to fold. Obviously, if he has a pair and the king clubs or something, he's going to continue there.
Yeah.
But I just feel like if I'm getting check raised in that spot, I'm almost always beaten. He's not going to be putting his money in really bad there, almost ever. And so I just felt like there'd be more value checking behind and trying to get value on a river bet.
Now, most of my experience comes from full ring live, and a lot of times if I will limp in late position with a small suited ace, and an ace flops in a multi-way pot, it's very, very hard, and I don't think very, very rare to extract 3 streets of value on a hand like that. Now, if you're limping in heads up with a weak ace on the button and an ace flops, do you find, obviously it's going to depend on your opponent, but do you find that normally your line is checking back the turn after you bet the flop with an ace, or can you extract 3 streets because no one ever puts you on an ace?
Well, the thing is, it's since I do it with such a wide range, I need to be betting a wide range as well. And so then they'll never really know when I have the ace, when I have nothing, when I have a busted straight draw, when I get there with 2 pair on the river, that kind of thing. And so it's not necessarily just, I have an ace this time, I'm going to check behind the turn, but I generally fire the turn in that kind of spot or whatever, with just about my whole range. It just seems to work out better overall.
Now, you did a couple of 5-10 no limit videos on card runners, obviously. And, one of the things that you brought up that I found interesting was when you're 3-betting light, and I've kind of brought this into my live game too, when you're 3-betting light, sometimes you can, when you make your continuation on the bet on the flop, it can be as little as 1/3 or 1/2 the pot, and it gets the job done.
Right. When playing 3-bet pots in position is a lot different than heads up or whatever. In a heads up spot, if you re-raise or whatever and continuation bet a third pot, they're never ever folding because they're in position. They get to see the turn, whatever. Right. But if you're playing a 6-max game, someone opens a cutoff, you 3-bet them on the button, just standard pot size 3-bet or whatever, and they call. Their range is usually pretty well defined too. If they had a super strong hand or complete crap, they'd often 4-bet. But generally when they call in that spot, they have a hand like 7s to 9s, ace queen, ace jack suited, king queen suited, something like that. And so it makes it really easy for if you get a favorable board, you can just bet a third or fourth pot and just take it down right there if if it doesn't work out for them. And I feel like they're just not playing back very much, and it's something I've been trying out a lot, and it seems to work out pretty well.
Now, favorable board, you mean say you 3-bet a guy with a queen 10 off or something like that, okay? And the board comes out paint low, offsuit. Is that what you're talking about? A favorable board?
All right. Well, if it comes out, I suppose it depends. Say I 3-bet with jack 2 suited or something like that, and the flop comes down king queen 3. That is an awesome flop for my hand because a lot of times they will have 7s, 8s, 9s, something like that. And so when they check it to me, most people are like, oh, he 3-bet, he's got ace king, something like that, whatever, because they're not really thinking on too high of a level. And you can get away with betting fourth of the pot on that flop. And they're just going to give it up, what can you do? You have pocket 9s on a king queen 3 board and a raise pot. There's just not a lot you can do in that situation. So it seems to work pretty well. The sizing doesn't really matter in that kind of spot.
Now, where I think a lot of people who are over aggressive try to go with that is that you're not always necessarily continuation betting every board. Let's talk about unfavorable boards in that spot.
Okay.
Yeah.
If I have an actual hand, if I have jack 2 suited and I get a queen jack 3 flop, or I have middle pair or whatever, I'll often not bet that because my hand has plenty of showdown value.
Right.
And if I bet, I'm folding out all the hands I beat that are drawing super thin or whatever, or I'm going to get bluffed off it because I can't really continue there, or they're going to have a better hand. And so I think there's just more value in checking behind that kind of spot when you actually have a piece of the board and you have some showdown value.
Now I've actually talked to the last few guests just about that concept itself and maybe how the games have changed over the last 2-3 years, where you check back with a middle pair on the flop, and it doesn't allow a guy who might have flat call with a suited connector to check raise you on a draw, whereas maybe a year or two, people would bet like a middle pairish type hand, and then they wouldn't be able to continue on when they get check raised.
Right.
So now, how does the playability of those suited connectors go down when everybody kind of pot controls their medium strength hands?
Well, I wouldn't say that everyone pot controls as much. I think a lot of the mistakes that the people playing 3-6, 5-10 no limit online that are trying to move up to the 10, 20, 25, 50 games make is they continuation bet too much in re-raise pots. Say we're playing 5-10, guy opens to 35, you make it 110 on the button, so there's like 225 in the pot or whatever, 235, and he checks to you and you have king queen and you get like an ace 10 3 flop or something. That's a spot where if you continuation bet $60, now that's kind of cool because you could have like a hand like ace king super strong or whatever, or you could just have complete crap. But I'd often check behind that spot, fire turn, fire river, something like that. But a lot of guys that are trying to move up or whatever, they'll bet like $200 there. It just doesn't really make any sense. And then they're going to get check shoved on, or the guy's just going to fold. And so I think you give up too much money in that kind of spot, just continuation betting too much. And I think there's just more value in you betting smaller or just checking behind, playing some pot control.
When I'm playing live, I just think that people don't really pay attention that much. And in the true sense of poker, if I'm really trying to balance my range, and I'm checking behind with middle pair when I flop like middle pair, sometimes I should be checking behind a very, very strong hand like top set.
Certainly.
But again, I think live I just lose so much value by doing that. Now, in games where people are paying attention and the opponents are stronger, what do you think about like balancing ranges there with big, big hands?
Well, if I'm playing, say, 25-50 online with a bunch of regulars, I probably won't, even if I have, the middle pair type hand, I'll often, make a really silly 4th or 5th pot continuation bet in that kind of spot anyway. And I'll just do that with my entire range. It helps to get paid off when I have my big hands. Generally people aren't going to be check raise bluffing that often in that kind of spot. It's just it's so scary. Oh, it's a re-raise pot. Oh, he bet small. Looks like he has a big hand trying to induce me to do something stupid. But, there definitely is value. Sometimes I will mix it up. If I flop, if I have jacks, I re-raise pre-flop, it becomes like jack 7-3, a lot of times, you can check behind that, because it looks like you have ace king or whatever. You're trying to, catch a king or whatever. They'll bet into you on the turn, bet into you on the river, and then you can ship it in on them, and they'll be like, "Oh, what's going on? This doesn't make any sense." And there's definitely value to doing that for sure.
One of the other things too, after you 3-bet, or even just a raise in general, when you're 3-betting. And you bet 1/3 pot, or when you bet 1/2 pot, and it just gets the job done, or your heads up, and if you raise and a favorable board comes out, and you bet half pot and gets the job done. Are there certain boards though that you bet more with your air because you don't want to get floated?
Yeah, sure.
70-80% pot.
Right. Well,
like that.
like I said, I feel like I play pretty exploitably. I do mess with my bet sizing a whole lot, and I feel like a very astute player that's playing one table, taking a lot of notes on me, is going to be able to pick up on that and figure out my tendencies. And I will mess with my bet sizing a whole lot. I can't think of super specific example, but heads up, I feel like I do it a little bit different than if it was a 6-max game in position. Most of my continuation bets on the flop are usually like 3/4 pot, pretty standard, that kind of thing. On the river is when I start to make different kind of bet sizing heads up. 6-max though, like I said, if I re-raise and get called in position, I will do a lot of that. Bet 4th pot. Sometimes I will bet bigger. Like if it's a blind versus blind in a 6-max game, this is a spot that I feel like comes up a decent bit. If I don't re-raise pre-flop, but I just call. Say someone opens a $30 in a 5-10 game, and I just call pre-flop.
Right.
And I get let's say I get an ace 9-3 board, okay, and I have queen 6 suited or whatever. I defend really really light out of the big blind. And they check the flop. A lot of times I'll just bet 50 or 60 there to try to make it look like I have an ace or whatever, make a big bet, that kind of thing, and that'll blow them off. Their king high or pair of eights or pair of tens or something like that. And I feel like that's a good spot where if you just make a bigger bet with your crap, you're going to take it down a lot more than if you bet 30 or 20 or something like that.
Right, just because it almost seems more believable. They just don't want to get involved with a marginal hand.
If you bet like 20 or 30 or something, you're going to get played back at more, almost certainly. Just because people are like, oh, he bets so small. Oh, he does this so much. It's really annoying. I got to check raise him at some point. This is a good spot.
Right. Now, for people that don't know exactly what you're playing right now, what is your standard game right now?
Honestly, I don't really have a standard game. This past week I've played 25-50, 51 no limit. I played 200, 400 PLO. I played 25-50 PLO. I played a couple tournaments. Just whatever's running. If there's good games, I'm probably going to be playing in them. If I'm home and online, not really doing a whole lot. I don't really like. I probably don't even put in as many hours as a lot of people. I don't have this burning desire to be like, oh, I got to go home and load up a bunch of tables or whatever.
Right.
I use a decent amount of game selection, and if there's good games with the higher stakes, I'll generally sit in them, but I don't really have a set standard game that I play.
Well, the reason why I asked that is because it leads me into a question. I've actually heard like 4 or 5 people just generally bitching here at the World Series. Now, I don't know if you haven't played 5-10 or 10-20 online in a while, but these guys at the 5-10 and 10-20 no limit online level that now play with them in quarter here.
Right.
They're just like, yeah, you know what? It just seems like at our level it's so hard. We're just flipping EV neutral situations, and the only people that come into our games now are the people that are trying to move up.
Right.
In terms of people being the live ones, and I don't know if that's the same thing at the higher level. What's your whole take on that?
I guess you're referencing the aggressiveness of the games and how they're just so much more 3 and 4 betting going on than there used to be.
Yeah, and it just sounds like to me that these guys say that there's just less fish. Obviously, there's less fish in the games.
There's definitely less fish. Yeah. The fish now are basically the bad regulars. If I'm pretty comfortable with my 6 max no limit game, and so if everybody's 100x stacks, I'm pretty happy to be there. But I think what we're kind of looking for is some of the regulars that are more exploitable. They play more just raise full. They don't really think. They just kind of have set pre-flop guidelines that they follow, that kind of thing. I mean, they're good players, but they're just not quite up to that level. And those are the kind of today's fish that you're looking for. There's not anybody that's going to come in and just open shove 7 deuce off anymore.
Right.
Like I guess that probably didn't happen too much back in the day, but it definitely doesn't happen now.
Or stack off 300 big bets with like ace jack on a jack high board. Something like that.
Well, I mean, I wouldn't say that. I mean, in the super aggressive game, sometimes it's not that terrible. But yeah, like it's just not the same as it used to be, And they definitely are right. There aren't people that are just gonna limp call pre-flop and then check call with top pair the whole way with no kicker or something. The games aren't like that anymore. They're more aggressive. People are more intelligent, just better all around players.
One of the interesting hands that I saw in your first 5-10 video, basically you 3-bet an under-the-gun raiser with 10-9 off. He 4-bet. And you said that this is actually not a bad spot here to shove because you thought his range was polarized so much and that you could definitely get some folds. You also talked about if he does call, it's good for image. So let's talk about a couple of those things. He did call. He had ace-king.
Right.
And you ended up stacking off. Now, where does that image lead you? I mean, the logical thing would be, well, I'm never going to really 5-bet light again because these guys are going to always play.
Well, here's the thing. It's going to make my spots a lot simpler to play, and I am a big fan of that. I talk about that in some of my videos. A lot of people are like, "Oh, maximize EV at all times," but if you're having like trouble past that point, if you have a tough turn decision or something you're not used to, you're going to make a more minus EV mistake there than if you just kept it simpler earlier on. Now, if I 5-bet shove 10-9 off on someone early in a session, they know that I'm willing to shove light over a 4-bet, so I'm going to get 4-bet bluffed a whole lot less, and that is just huge in these games because a lot of times people 3-bet so much, the counter is to 4-bet a little bit more, and people are doing that. But if you show them that you're going to shove 10-9 off, get called, insta reload, whatever, then they're not going to be 4-betting you light, and that makes it so much easier to play.
When we've talked about momentum too in matches, and usually regarding heads up. Talked about this with Krantz, talked about this with Dusty and Leatherass. What do you think about momentum, and just in the sense that you're almost playing every single hand heads up? So if you win a hand, there's almost like a slight tilt factor in almost every single hand.
Right. I just actually put up my latest video. I don't think it's actually up on the site yet, but I do talk quite a bit about momentum. I'm 3-tabling Flip Poker, who's one of the people that have been winning a lot at the Heads Up 25-50 games on Full Tilt. Okay, so for momentum, it's definitely very important in a heads up match. A lot of times, you'll start off, probably not winning a whole lot of pots or something. Your opponent's going to run you over, and a lot of times that makes it harder to play 3-bet pots out of position. They're going to be floating your continuation bets a lot more, and just generally making life more difficult to play or to deal with. And the only counter to that really is winning, a big pot and trying to take the momentum back, and then having the same effect. It goes back and forth throughout the match. But when you have it seems like people generally play a little bit more scared. Again, you can float more in 3-bet pots in position, just kind of take it away on the turn more. And it just, I don't really know what else to say.
Yeah, so it's definitely something, and just keeping almost like Joe Tall and I talked about, internal game issues, keeping that in check, keep not necessarily getting all whacked out when you lose a pot, right? You're playing in every pot, heads up.
Yeah, definitely, and especially if you're playing on a few tables. I mean, just staying sane and just trying to keep yourself in control is just huge. I mean, if you start to tilt a little bit and you're playing a bunch of tables where someone heads up and they have all the momentum, they're being super aggressive, you're getting run over, then you try to get it back. I mean, the way you try to get it back, you might be playing too aggressively out of position, you might fire too many streets, and then they can really just start to put pressure on you and take all your money. You need to just deal with it differently. I talk about how to deal with when someone has all the momentum or whatever, how to get it back. In my next video, and I'm sure I deal with it differently than a lot of people.
Let's talk about using aggressive players' aggression against them.
Okay.
And talking about sometimes Dusty Leatherass Schmidt, who was on the show, says that sometimes you can check call off your stack with top pair in a good way, or sometimes he check calls, top set. Like just letting a guy hang you.
Sure.
And I played a hand last night, and I've never played a hand like this ever before. And we're going to talk about sleeper straddling, but I was playing in a 25-25 game where there was a sleeper straddle on the button, which is $50 straddle on the button. It was last act. And we were playing six-handed, and the game was great. But there was a very good, very aggressive internet kid on my right. He was probably like 22 years old. And in the small blind, I'm first to act with aces. And I limp in, and it gets folded around to him, and he opens for 225.
Okay.
And I just smooth call.
All right.
And to make a long story short, the board comes out 10-3 dry, and I check call with aces on all three streets, and I lose a big pot because the guy has flopped a set of threes.
Okay.
In that spot, I was very, very concerned about the fact that I never really had any information about my hand with a one-pair hand, and I played a big pot out of position with a one-pair hand. So, the board came out 10-3. The turn was a 6. I checked. He bet pot. I called. And the river was a queen. I checked. He bet pot again, and I called. And I thought it was a spot where it was just a great place for him to three-barrel.
Yeah, I mean, your hand doesn't really look like a whole lot.
Yeah.
On that kind of board, I mean, a 10-3 board, he raised pre-flop. He's a super aggressive guy. You limped in. You called. I mean, a lot of times you'll have like 10-9, 10-8 suited, pair of eights, something like that. The turn brought a 6 or something. Say you have like 5s or 4s or whatever. Now you have a straight draw to go with it. You're probably going to be calling again. It is a pretty good spot for him to be barreling you. And
an overcard on the river, too.
Right. An overcard on the river. Now you're going to fold your 10-9, 10-8 stuff because, you have to give him credit for a hand at that point, right? I mean, that's the way he's thinking. Yeah. And so, I think doing that on occasion is fine. Generally I'm more aggressive in that kind of spot. But I think, I mean, it's kind of a cooler at a set, but...
I guess the point of the question is if you slow play aces in the sense where you flat call pre-flop, is it almost the same strength as a set in the sense that if you had flop, say, top set there, kind of the same thing, where is he ever going to value what he is value betting?
Right, like say he was firing 2 barrels with a hand like king queen jack, something like that.
Right.
By the time he gets to the river, he's got top pair, and your hand probably isn't going to beat that the way you've played it.
Right.
I think he's definitely going to be value betting the river. So I mean, your hand's good a ton. I mean, even if he is value betting, if he's bluffing, you got him beat. But it's just kind of unfortunate that you ran into a set there.
Right. And of course, you play a more of an aggressive style. But I assume that there are spots where you identify the other aggressive players, and sometimes you give them some rope to hang themselves.
Yeah. Certainly. I had a hand actually. I don't know, I guess a couple of weeks ago that I just felt really, really stupid on. It was right after I was making my 5-10 video. And so I was trying to play some 5-10, feel out the games, so I like to know, how the games are just about every level, so I have an idea what's going on in the poker world or whatever. But I re-raised pre-flop in position on the button or whatever. I don't even remember what I had, doesn't really matter. The flop came down like Jack 7-3. He checked. I bet like 4th pot, 3rd pot, something like that. He called. The turn was a king. He checked. I bet probably slightly over half pot to set up a river shove because I put him on hand like 10s or something like that. And the river, I don't know, it was like an offsuit deuce or something. He checked. I shipped it in. He snap called. He had to sit at jacks. That's
check called all 3 streets with top set.
Because he knows that I am going to be barreling fairly light, especially on that kind of board when the scare card comes on the turn. That kind of thing, and I think he played the hand great. He owned me, so there's definitely merit for that.
Now, the interesting thing too here, we talked a little bit before the show. If anybody's here at the Rio playing live, and I guess you said you haven't been playing live here.
I haven't been playing live cash that much. No,
they allow a sleeper straddle.
Right.
So, I know you probably haven't thought about this at all, but just briefly, if you're actually able to straddle on the button, how does that affect the change?
I mean, I would straddle every single time, obviously.
Right? And would you not attack the straddles as much? I mean, there's more dead money out there, but the guy's got position, right?
I think it's just like such a powerful play for the button, and it really depends on who the person is on the button. If it's like some old guy that's just nitty or whatever, I'd be raising everything from the hijack, cutoff, whatever. But if there's someone like me on the button, I mean, honestly, I would just fold every single spot unless I had super good hands, because I'm going to be 3-betting the button, just about everything, especially if stacks are 200x deep or deeper. There's just so much value in seeing the flop in position and like re-raise with deep stacks. And so I guess, the adjustments I would make is I would make sure to note who's on the button, who's straddling, and play it accordingly from there.
So you would be 3-betting with some of your weaker hands as well on the button?
Absolutely.
With deep stacks?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I feel like in the live games, especially, you can get away with 3-betting so much more in position. You're not going to be getting 4-bet as much, but a lot of people are going to be calling and just kind of playing kind of meh post flop.
Right,
You're going to be able to do that bet kind of third pot stuff and get away with it. Fire a few barrels. Sometimes they'll check call flop, check call turn, but give up to that river bet, and you'll be able to just pick up a ton of money like that, just playing in position, playing aggressively against weaker players.
Brought this up a little bit on the show before as well. Now that there's some introduction of these 200 big blind tables online, and as those tables get up and they're introduced at the higher levels, and sometimes we see, maybe at some point we'll see even a deeper table or an uncapped table.
Sure.
Do you think that some of these guys that are always used to playing 100 big bets deeper, they're going to have some trouble adjusting? And
Absolutely.
Yeah.
As stacks get deeper, there's just so many things change. You can call more, you can 3-bet more, you can 4-bet more, you can 5-bet more. There's just so many different levels of play as the stacks get deeper, and so many people just don't have experience playing. I certainly don't have that much experience, but I feel like I have more than most. But there's just so many changes you can make. It would take 20 hours to get into it all, but it's just a completely different game if everyone's sitting 200x deep as opposed to 100.
Where obviously at 100 big blinds deep, if you're getting it in with an overpair or something like aces, it's all obviously not.
Yeah,
that bad,
there's only so much you can do 100x deep. Basically, if you re-raise pre-flop and you have an overpair, you're getting it in no matter what.
Right.
And it's pretty limited. Stacks get deeper. That's when I guess real poker or whatever, quote unquote. All these live players talk about like, oh, deeper stacks. You internet guys don't know what to do. You're just so aggressive and you just shovel money in and.
Yeah,
I'm
but
going to teach you.
Yeah, but if a guy is playing deeper, so do you not come from the school of thought that where if a guy is more skillful, he should always play deeper?
Absolutely.
Oh, okay.
Absolutely. If you have a deeper stack than your opponents and you're a better player, then you can get the maximum money from them at every possibility.
Right. So what's next for you here at the series? And you're just gonna still chill out, play a little online. You played a couple tournaments, you said?
Yeah, I've played a few tournaments. I cashed in the first one. I got like 13th in the Parliament Hold'em event, 10K Parliament Hold'em. Actually,
that was a pretty tough field, right?
I actually ran a really sick bluff on Patrick Antonius on the bubble.
Oh, really?
Yeah. You want me to talk about that? Okay,
sure.
all right. So I thought it was actually kind of a cool hand. I guess Ryan Young, he's a young guy. I'm good buddies with him. He's a super solid live tournament player. Our table's playing, I guess, 7-handed right now. I think there's 37 left, 36 to get to the money. Ryan opens the cutoff. I call on the button with ace-jack off. It's, I think, 2,500, 5,000, so he opens at 15K. Patrick calls out of the small blind. He's got about 180,000, 200,000, something like that, which is probably slightly above average at this point. Big blind folds. Flop comes down 9-4-4. Patrick checks, Ryan checks. I bet out 26.5K.
And what do you have again?
I have ace-jack off.
Ace-jack off. So you're betting to try to take the try to take the pot down.
Sometimes I have the best hand, but I think overall it's better to fire out half pot and just kind of take it down there.
Okay.
I feel like they're not going to be check raising that much because stacks are shallower. It's on the bubble. I'm not going to be getting played back at too much there. Anyways, Patrick calls and Ryan folds.
You've got position, obviously.
Right. The turn is a 6.
Okay.
So it's 9-6-4-4, and Patrick checks, and I think for a bit, and I bet. I look at his stack, make it look like I'm trying to see how much he has, and I bet 56.5K. And he thinks for probably 2 minutes or so, and then he makes the call. And at this point, I'm thinking, he has a pair of 9s or a pair of 8s or 7s or something like that.
Right.
And
the board is 9-9-4-6, right?
No, it's 9-6-4-4.
9-6-4-4.
Right.
Okay. 9-6-4-4.
And so I I'm value betting a jack, I'm value betting an ace on the river, and I'm probably bluffing a lot of cards because he's got about 110,000 left, and it is the bubble, and this is a pretty big tournament, whatever, and I have him covered. The river's a beautiful king of spades, and he thinks for a bit, and then he checks, and I'm like, I look at his stack, I'm like, how much you got left? Okay, I'll pot it, and so I stick it in. And he banked for literally 10 minutes. Like the whole room stopped. Everyone's coming over and looking at it. He ends up folding. He was like, "You're probably value betting jacks or queens or something here." So I mean, we have played a bit in the past. He knows who I am. And so he's like, "Oh, this is the worst fold I'll ever make." And he finally folds it. And then I flip up ace jack and have a good time with it. And I guess it was kind of like getting him back for sucking out on me in the 25K heads up. But I thought that was a kind of cool hand.
Did he show you what he had? Do you think he had like a medium strength 9, like a 10-9 suited or something like that?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's what he had. Yeah. He did. I mean, he did say you're probably value betting queens or jacks here. So it does seem like he could have a hand like 10s. I feel like he'd re-raise that pre-flop, but I'm not entirely sure. I think it's okay to call there pre-flop, and I think he played it right if he did.
And he thinks that there's a good enough chance that you're flatting there with queens and jacks in position from the field that you wouldn't re-raise that pre-flop?
I wouldn't re-raise their pre-flop. If I had aces, kings, queens, jacks, I wouldn't re-raise their pre-flop. If I had a hand like 6-7 or 4-5 or something, I would.
Right.
But those hands just have so much value in seeing the flop, especially with shorter stacks. It's a tournament. It's not a cash game. If I re-raise there, I'm getting a ton of folds.
Right.
And it's just that's something else you can get into. Just the differences between tournaments and cash games.
Well, this this show is mainly about cash games, but I actually heard a pretty good cash game player. He's been, a pretty good tournament player, but he's kind of like in this mode of always flatting now with aces pre-flop in tournaments, just because he thinks that he gets so much of the range to fold. It's almost so super strong.
In tournaments, I almost never 3-bet with aces.
Yeah.
Like, I almost never 3-bet with ace king either. Just like super, super strong hands or whatever, I just feel like you're giving so much away, 3-betting pre-flop. In a cash game where people are used to the aggression, used to getting 3-bet, they're going to play accordingly.
Right.
If your range is aces, kings, queens, on down to, 4 or 5 offsuit, then, people are going to realize that online because they played with you so much and, 4-bet you more, call you more, that kind of thing. But in a tournament, a lot of these guys, they're not used to that aggression. They don't see it. They're not used to the young online 6-max players that are always 3-betting a ton of hands. They haven't figured out how to counter that yet. And so a lot of times, they'll fold, like 10s, ace queen suited.
Right.
Because they're like, oh, he's re-raising. He has aces, kings, or ace king, because that's what I do.
Right.
So you lose a lot of value, and I think you can get that back by just calling pre-flop and kind of taking advantage of it from there.
Now, hands like jacks and 10s, though, in a tournament where I would think that you'd want almost like a king queen and an ace queen to fold, that's a little bit tougher to flat, right?
The thing is, if you re-raise there, say we'll take the exact same spot on the bubble in the 10K pot limit hold'em. Me and Ryan had about the same exact chips. I think probably 250,000, something like that. And so we both have 50 times the big blind, which is a pretty good stack in a tournament or whatever. Say he opens a 3x, he makes it 15K, and I have a hand like jacks or whatever, and I 3-bet him to like 45 or 50K. Like, he's gonna be folding in that kind of spot. Like, again, I said I'd be 3-betting super light there, but because he's gonna be folding so much. But if I have a hand like jacks, and then he re-raises me there, and he 4-bets me, like, what do I do?
Yeah, it's very difficult to continue.
Yeah, I have no idea what to do. Yeah. And actually, the best play is probably folding. Like, he's not going to be putting in, 2/3 of his stack on a bluff there. Like, so I think there's just more value in calling in that kind of spot. Plus, he's not going to give me credit for having jacks when it comes, 8-3 deuce or whatever. And I feel like I can get a lot of value from whatever hands he can have.
Well, it's interesting that you say that you also flat with an ace-king there, too, in terms of being, very strong at a tournament. Now, if you flat with an ace-king and the board comes out dry, are you shipping a lot of flops there?
No, I'm probably going to be calling a lot of flops.
Yeah.
If, say I have ace-king or whatever, and the flop comes down 7-3 deuce, and he continuation bets into me, he's continuation betting his whole range. Like, he's going to have, like, jack-10, king-queen, king-10, whatever. So, I have the best hand a lot already. Like, there's no need to ship it in. Plus, if I turn a king or whatever, then he's never going to give me credit for having a king. Because, he's not going to expect me to have ace-king, and then float the flop with ace-king high, and then just kind of from there. So if he does have a real hand, like, 10s, jacks, queens, something like that, a king comes, it's not really going to scare him that much.
Right.
And so I'm probably going to get a stack on that kind of turn.
The other interesting thing, too, is if you play it like that, it almost kind of brings me back to kind of a cash game, or even though you're not as deep, but if you smooth call that flop with ace king, and now say the board pairs or the board comes out kind of a non-dry board, and now he checks. Are you playing that as a check back because you've got showdown value?
Absolutely.
And also, if you catch an ace or a king, you might extract value from ace queen or king
Definitely.
queen at the
There's
end.
there's just absolutely no reason to bet, because in that spot, like the way the stacks are, he's either going to be check shoving or check folding. And if he's check folding, you have the best hand almost every
Right,
time. And if
right.
he check shoves, you might have the best hand. You never know. And so there's just not really much value in a bet. Worse hands aren't going to call, and better hands aren't going to fold. So
I guess maybe the tough spot comes in is if that board comes out dry, like a 7-3-4 with 2 clubs, and you're up
Right.
like against a David Pham type situation where he
Yeah.
fires at you, you call, turns a blank, and now he fires again at you.
Right.
And I guess maybe it's just kind of a live read type situation as well. You want to continue on.
I've never really played with David Pham,
Yeah.
so I can't really tell you. But it just depends. In poker, everything's kind of situation specific or whatever,
Right.
and you just got to kind of go with how you're feeling at the moment. So.
Well, Raptor, David Benefield, that's some bonus tournament stuff that I didn't even think we were going to get into. So,
All right.
Thanks a lot for stopping by, man.
Absolutely.
And
Thanks
you
for
said
having
that
me.
You're going to have a new video up on Card Runners soon, right?
Yeah, it should be up by the end of the week.
Momentum. Right?
Absolutely.
Definitely an important topic, and heads up again.
Sure.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
And we will see you next week, so join us. Take it easy right here on Cash Plays.